like and subscribe. Beyond Antarctica, Chapter 7. The dinghy skidded up to the beach with a scrape against the sand. John leaped from the boat, his movements quick, but as he prepared to storm into the village, Bick called out, "John, pull back that anger." John spun around, his face tight with frustration. "I don't have time for this," he snapped. Bick responded firmly. "We need you calm and collected, John. Take 2 seconds, one deep breath, then give us a basic game plan." John paused, his chest heaving with rushed breaths. He looked at Bick, acknowledging the wisdom in his words, and took a deep, steadying breath. After a brief moment to collect himself, he laid out the plan. "Bob, you will slow us down, so Bick, you and Bob stay here to guard the dinghy," his tone now more controlled. John handed Bick the pistol, but Bick pushed it back, opting instead to grab one of the oars from under the bench seating of the dinghy. "I have Bob," he said. "You might need the pistol." Bob, who was still taking his time getting out of the dinghy, nodded in agreement. Despite his size, a beast of a man at 6 feet 7 inches and 390 pounds, his movements were slow and measured. Scanning the eerily quiet village, Todd voiced his unease. "I don't like this. It's too quiet." Meanwhile, Tony finished loading the shotgun, the click of the shells a stark contrast to the silence enveloping the village. With the roles defined and weapons ready, John, Todd, and Tony prepared to advance into the village. The quiet was unnerving, but they were determined to find Kim and bring her back safely. As the trio moved off, Bick and Bob took their positions, watching vigilantly from the dinghy, protecting their escape route. Tony, his adrenaline surging, burst into a nearby hut, shotgun at the ready. After a tense moment, he walked back out, shaking his head. "Empty, sir," he reported to John, who was simultaneously clearing the next hut with similar results. "John, over here," Todd called out as he noticed a cluster of fresh tracks leading out of the town towards a narrow path. John leaned down and ran his hand across the sandy ground, confirming their suspicions. "Looks like the whole village headed that way," pointing. Todd voiced his concerns. "John, I'm really not liking this. We are exposed, sir." John, understanding the risks, responded with a grim resolve. "Yeah, sometimes you have to walk through the fire knowing you will be burned in the process, because life leaves you no other choice." Tony nodded, taking the lead. "I have point. Stay behind me, sir," he instructed, readying his shotgun and stepping forward cautiously. Todd pulled out his knife, his eyes scanning the surroundings. "Time is of the essence. Let's move swiftly but safely. Tony, go 10 feet ahead in case of an ambush." With Tony leading the way, the group began their tense march down the trail. The dense foliage of the woods seemed to close in around them, the shadows deepening as the sun began to set. The path wound deeper into the woods, the tracks a clear indication there on their trail. As they moved, the quietness of the woods was unsettling, the usual sounds of wildlife eerily absent. It was as if the forest itself was holding its breath, awaiting the unfolding of events. With Tony 10 feet ahead and John and Todd closely behind, they proceeded. The trail ahead held unknown dangers, but turning back was not an option, not when one of their own was in peril. Tony suddenly dropped to one knee, holding a hand up in the air as a signal for the others to stop. With a careful hand gesture, he motioned them forward. As John and Todd quietly approached, Tony whispered, "Stay low," pointing down the trail where the darkened sky was punctuated by the pulsating glow of lit torches. "Look at that structure," John murmured in awe as they edged closer, the silhouette of an imposing building becoming visible against the night sky. "No way they built that," Todd replied skeptically, his voice barely above a whisper. "It's a temple of some kind," Tony added, his eyes scanning the area for any signs of danger. John nodded and says, "Move into the edge of the woods. We'll approach using the tree line for cover." Silently, the trio moved closer. They advanced slowly towards the structure, their movements cautious. As they neared the gateway of the temple, then the sound of tribal drums pierced the air, rhythmic and fast-paced, resonating through the dense foliage with a primal urgency that quickened the pulse of all who heard it, echoing off the ancient stone walls of the temple, creating a soundtrack that seemed to narrate their cautious advance. Each drumbeat felt like a heartbeat, driving them forward, intensifying the atmosphere as they moved closer to the source. As the drumming grew louder, it underscored the significance of the moment, blending with the night sounds of the jungle to form a living, breathing entity of sound and spirit. The torches cast eerie shadows on the ground. A breeze kicked up, causing the flames to dance wildly, briefly illuminating the intricate details of the temple's architecture. Inside, the sounds of chanting, the rhythmic cadence suggesting some form of ceremony, was underway. The air was thick with the scent of burning incense. With each step closer, the details of the temple became more pronounced, the megalithic stonework more intricate. The men exchanged glances as they prepared to peer deeper into the gateway. As they positioned themselves just outside the entrance, the group witnessed an awe-inspiring scene. Tribal men stood on the upper walls with large drums, their intense rhythms filling the air. Others wielded what appeared to be large human skulls. They raised them, blowing into them, producing a blood-curdling screech that sent shivers down their spines. It sounded like death itself, a haunting melody that echoed throughout the temple. With that sound, the drumming, chanting, and dancing halted abruptly, casting a heavy silence over the courtyard. The elder then stepped up onto a platform at the back of the temple, standing at the base of a 30-foot-tall mini-pyramid whose capstone glowed ominously under the night sky. He raised a staff, pointing it towards the heavens, and began to speak in an indistinguishable language. Then, dramatically, he pointed the staff towards Kim, who was tied to a cross in the center of the courtyard, evoking a rush of fear in the hearts of her friends hidden in the shadows. The elder then pointed to the sky again, and subsequently at each of the 4 round pools at the base of Kim's feet, each filled with a mysterious liquid that shimmered under the moonlight. He repeated the gesture towards the sky, then directed his staff at 4 statues of large humans, each standing 20 feet tall, at the base of each pool. With a final, fervent scream directed at the heavens, the elder shoved his staff into a recess in the ground, pulling it like a lever. The ground beneath the temple seemed to tremble momentarily. Hidden in the tree line, John, Tony, and Todd exchanged looks of horror. They knew they had to act fast to save Kim from whatever fate awaited her in this terrifying ceremony. The tribal leader's actions grew more frenetic as the ceremony reached its climax. He jumped up and down, shouting unintelligibly, his body spinning as he yelled at the sky with fervor. Abruptly, he pulled the staff back toward him again, and at that moment, a loud rumbling echoed through the temple grounds. As the reverberations filled the air, the 4 giant statues surrounding the courtyard reacted to the elder's manipulation of the staff. Their arms raised outward, wrists drooping as if going limp, and from each a stream of red liquid poured out. This liquid, shimmering with an ethereal quality, cascaded into the pools at the base of the statues, resembling the blood of the gods. When the red substance hit the already silvery, glossy substance in the pools, a violent reaction occurred. The mixture began boiling, the surface churning into miniature vortexes. Amid this chaos, the cross and platform holding Kim began to rise eerily into the air. The faster the pools spun, the higher she was lifted. Soon, she was hovering in midair, her feet level with the statues' heads, about 20 feet off the ground. Kim's screams of fear pierced the night as the platform continued its ascent, driven by the mystical forces unleashed by the ritual. As Kim hovered, suspended in a terrifying limbo, the elder screamed once more toward the heavens. Almost instantly, the drums and other festive noises resumed, the temple grounds once again alive with dancing and chanting. John, Tony, and Todd watched from their hidden vantage point, their hearts pounding with desperation. The sight of Kim, floating helplessly above the courtyard, drove John to the brink of recklessness. In a moment of pure desperation, John charged into the temple courtyard, pistol drawn, his actions driven by a fierce determination to save Kim. Tony, caught off guard by John's sudden movement, lunged forward, trying to hold him back. "John, not yet," he whispered. "Yeah, it's going down right here, right now," John retorted, his voice thick with resolve. Tony, with a resigned sigh, Guess we're doing this okay corral style. No plan, just action. Cocked his shotgun and fired it into the sky. The festivities halted instantly, every eye turning to the three men now standing in the entrance. The tribal leader screamed frantically, pointing at them. The tribal members picked up their skull horns, blowing into them to create a disturbing screech that sent the tribe into a blood rage, charging at the intruders. John reacted instantly, his pistol raised and firing. A bullet struck the tribal leader in the forehead, dropping him onto the platform, landing on the staff, pushing it forward. This action caused the pools to start draining, smoke billowing out of the pits as Kim's platform shook violently. The villagers halted in their tracks, shocked by John's lethal ability to point and kill. As if by magic, another charged and John shot again, dropping the attacker with a bullet to the chest. The villagers began to back away slowly. "Kim!" Tony screamed as he tossed the shotgun to Todd and leapt onto the arm of one of the statues. Using it as leverage, he propelled himself up and lunged towards Kim, landing on the base of the shaking platform. With a few quick slices of his knife, he freed Kim from the cross. As he dropped from the platform, he yelled, "Jump!" Just as the platform began to topple, Kim leapt into Tony's waiting arms as he twisted to shield her from the debris raining down around them. The cross fell, striking Tony and piercing his right shoulder. He grunted in agony but quickly tossed it aside. He protected Kim beneath him, with blood gushing out of his shoulder. John rushed over, his heart pounding as he helped Kim to her feet. The villagers charged. Todd unleashed a flurry of shotgun rounds. The first shot decapitated the closest charging villager, and two more shots sent the remaining villagers scattering in fear. Todd rushed to Tony's side, lifting him over his shoulder. "It's time to go, Captain," he called to John. John glanced back at the chaos they were leaving behind. "Yeah, looks like we outstayed our welcome. Hurry!" The group hurried down the path, escaping the temple with a sense of urgency. Kim screamed, "Let me go, Dad!" as John carried her over his shoulder. She kicked and screamed, "Let me go, damn it!" forcing John to stumble, causing them both to fall to the ground. Kim jumped up immediately and ran to Todd. John, frustrated and stressed by the situation, snapped, "Kim, we need to go. We don't have time for your shit right now." Ignoring her father, Kim yelled, "Todd, put him down now," as she moved to Tony, who Todd was carrying on his shoulder, screaming that he might bleed out if not treated quickly. Todd carefully set Tony down as instructed. Kim, with a tear streaming down her cheek, quickly ripped open Tony's shirt to assess his injuries. Seeing the severity of the wound, she swiftly yanked Tony's knife from its sheath, cut a section of her skirt, and fashioned a makeshift bandage. She wrapped it tightly under his armpit and over his shoulder, using the knife handle to twist the fabric at the top to apply pressure, causing Tony to grunt in pain from the tight constriction. "This will not hold. We need to get him on the ship now, or he is going to bleed out," helping Tony to stand. Together, they supported him, hurrying towards the edge of the woods with the dinghy in sight. Bick, who had been anxiously waiting at the shoreline with Bob, spotted them approaching. Pointing out to the returning group, he shouted, "There they are." Halfway to the dinghy, a loud clicking noise bellowed out, breaking the tense silence. Suddenly, 4 raptors burst from the tree line, each bearing a villager mounted on its back, wielding golden lances. The raptors, equipped with blinders and muzzles and saddled with makeshift gear, were steered directly toward the group. One of the riders raised his lance in the air, hooting at the sky, and charged. The other 3 followed suit. John turned and fired, hitting the lead rider. The rider dropped off the saddle, and the raptor veered off into the woods, dragging the fallen villager behind. John fired again, but to his dismay, the gun clicked empty. He was out of bullets. As they arrived at the dinghy, Kim jumped in while Bob grabbed an oar from Bick and started charging towards Todd to help with Tony. John grabbed the shotgun off Tony's back just as the second raptor leaped towards them. He turned and fired, the raptor falling to the side. The shotgun clicked empty after the shot. As the third rider leaned out, charging at John with his lance extended, John rolled to the side. The raptor's body bounced hard against him as he narrowly avoided the tip of the lance and was thrown into the sand. The rider yanked on the reins, and the raptor turned and stampeded, plowing over John as it passed, heading towards Todd. Then, out of nowhere, The rider was dismounted by a resounding crack as an oar struck his chest. Bob yelled, "Now that's how we do it in the Bronx, boys," tossing his oar to the ground and helping John up. Kim, seeing her father spitting up blood, screamed in panic. Todd stopped her from rushing to John by lifting her into the air and tossing her back into the dinghy, insisting she stay put. As another screeching sound echoed, a rider blowing a skull horn and charging, Bob pushed the dinghy into the water. "Leave if this doesn't go well," he said, readying for another confrontation. With the raptor almost upon them, lance extended, Bob turned and took 2 steps forward to gain momentum. He leaned in hard, using his arm to deflect the incoming lance, and then shoulder-checked the raptor, lifting it into the air and body-slamming it and the rider into the sand, crushing the raptor's ribs as it yelped in pain. The rider hopped up and ran off in fear. "Hurry, Bob," Todd yelled, but Bob didn't move. Kim screamed, "No!" her voice piercing the air as she jumped out of the dinghy, Todd right by her side. Together, they pushed on Bob, trying to flip him over. As Bob rolled onto his back, he caught his breath. "I'm fine," he bellowed, his breathing still heavy and erratic from the effort. With a strained smile, he reassured them, "Just haven't moved like that since my football days at Ohio State." With Todd's help, Bob climbed into the dinghy, and as they arrived at the ship, Kim directed the crew to bring the wounded to the med bay immediately. "We have multiple lacerations. John has multiple cracked ribs. I need to see if his lung is pierced. Get that blood stopped on Tony. That wound must be sealed," Kim announced. Bob, still catching his breath, says, "Any chance I could get some bacon, Kim?" With a smile, Kim looked back over her shoulder. "I won't forget your bacon, Bob." Kim leaned in to hug her dad softly. John murmured, "You really need to start following orders." Looking up at him, Kim responded, "Mom's last words to me were that I was to protect you and take care of you. I promised her I would," as she took her last breath, squeezing my hand. She paused, a slight smile breaking through. As she added, "And she always outranked you in this family. Tell me I'm wrong." Her smile broadened, reinforcing her point. "Remember, I'm not a little girl anymore. You should have left me." John looked up, his voice soft. "Yeah, in what world do you think that would have happened?" This is not goodbye, nor the end. Until the story continues, my friends. B.N.Rocker.